your favorite radio station.
This is Afro Vibes Radio Houston.
You want to advertise on Medulla Talk? Well, contact Total Medulla at totalmedulla.com.
Too many MCs, not enough mics, not enough mics, not enough mics.
In a world where everyone is asleep, I'm awake. I am Christopher Mukes.
Having different perspectives and outlooks is key to growth. I'm Jarrells.
I don't claim to know everything. I just claim to know where to look. I'm Stephen Hawking.
I just slid right in. It's no big deal. I'm Kyle Lee. Devontae called me up on short notice.
Coming to you from the Afro Vibes Radio Houston studios, Total Medulla Entertainment presents Medulla Talk with your hosts, Devontae Hill and Stephen Hawkins. Salutations all and welcome to Medulla Talk. I'm your host, Devontae Hill. Today is Monday, October 2nd. So if you're listening on the Afro Vibes app on Thursdays, how you doing? If you're watching on YouTube, hey. And any other listening platforms, salutations to all. This is episode 3. We're 3 in there, man. We're doing this thing.
Yes, it's the rebirth.
So that's basically all the jokes you're going to hear for today, because today we're talking about domestic violence. So this is where basically it starts going downhill. But no, I'm here with the Stephen Hawkins.
It's not going to be that bad, you know?
Did you say Stephen Hawkins? Woo!
That's a compliment. See, Mom, they do love me.
See, we don't abuse you.
My mom said I should probably get off the show if I don't get enough claps. So that should be a part of my contract.
Wait, so that's all we got to do to get you off?
Yeah, it's a 3 clap minimum per episode. No, but yeah, I think today's going to be a really good topic, and how apt, especially with this month being Domestic Violence Awareness
Absolutely.
Month. So.
You also have Kyle Lee.
Hello, everyone.
Of course,
glad to
chill.
be back. Yeah, very chill. Just can't get excited about this one.
I'm not going to forget. So Jarrell Jarman.
Who?
The Jarrell Jarman is here.
Oh, Lord. Hello, everybody. I'm sure we'll handle this with our usual tact and grace.
You're not giving us very much credit
hey,
right
Devontae,
now.
you can go ahead and hang up now. You introduce yourself.
All right, cool. Yeah, I was about to do that. And we have a special guest today. We have Muhammad Jamal. Hey.
Hey everyone,
Hey.
excited to be here. Yeah.
So Jamal, tell them a little bit about yourself.
So right now I'm the judicial coordinator at Harris County Democratic Party. I'm a Dallas native. Spent 5 years on the East Coast doing organizing. Pakistani background. What else? Cowboys fan.
Yeah! There we go.
Hey,
was it on
you guys
Sunday
lose
though?
last week though?
Absolutely no.
Sunday.
You lost last week.
Okay,
right?
this
all
is a
good.
sports talk. Calm down, everybody.
I just want to make sure that was the case.
We're talking later.
I'm gonna take a knee to this conversation.
No, but we have a good stacked show for you guys. I actually have an interview that I conducted earlier today with Chau, Nguyen, and she is the Chief Marketing Officer of Houston Area Women's Center. So we're going to get into that, and of course our group discussion. We're going to take what she says and really kind of dive into it. So before other ado, let's get into that interview. All right, everyone. So I'm here with Chau Nguyen, and Chau, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
And she's been working in TV for 15 years. She was a reporter for KHOU. And in that process, she changed her career to social work and psychotherapy. Yeah. And so she's currently the Chief Marketing Officer at Houston Area Women's Center. So I thought she was an excellent person we're going to show, obviously, with all that knowledge packed in there.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Devontae, for having me and for allowing us to share our mission and our message to your listeners about what we do and who we can help.
Yeah, appreciate that. So I want to ask you, how did you get involved with social work to begin with? Because the change kind of seems kind of random.
People ask me that all the time, going from a television journalist to a social worker. Mm-hmm. Well, what I say is, for years and years, I covered a lot of stories in communities where people were in crisis. Mm. And I got to connect with real people. And that touched me in a way that never left me. I felt like I was kind of a social worker in action all those years in training.
Right.
And so if you think about what we do as reporters, we go out to these crisis situations, we connect with people at their most tragic moments, and we try to help in a small way. Well, I think that's what social workers do. They're helpers, right? They're healers. And so for me, it was a natural transition. also, working at a nonprofit that serves survivors of domestic and sexual violence.
Yeah.
What I can tell you is now I'm a storyteller to the clients we serve. I tell the story of our mission, our message. I tell it to prospective volunteers, to donors, and to survivors who need our help. So very easy transition. I know it's hard to connect until I explain it.
So kind of speaking on that, can you tell folks who aren't familiar with the Houston Area Women's Center kind of what you guys do and what you're involved with?
Yeah, well, thanks for that opportunity.
Yeah.
HAWK, as we are acronymed, Houston Area Women's Center, is celebrating our 40th anniversary this year, 40 years of opening our doors to survivors of domestic and sexual violence. We offer support services in the areas of shelter, counseling, advocacy, education. Our hotlines are 24/7. Our shelter operates 365 days a year. So that's the kind of work we do. It's important work because we envision a day that survivors can be free from the effects of violence and can move their lives forward and build those safe and healthy lives that they deserve.
So how common is domestic violence in Houston? Because, I mean, it's something that a lot of people in my circle aren't really familiar with. No one's directly affected. So if you're not directly affected, it's usually not in like your forefront of your thoughts. So how common actually is it?
It's actually more common than you think. What we know statistically is that 74% of all Texans, that's basically 3 out of every 4 persons, either has been a victim of domestic violence or knows somebody who suffered from domestic violence. It's a pretty pervasive issue. And I can tell you right now, we just started October, which is Domestic Violence Awareness Month. We had a news conference with our partner agencies and law enforcement, and Chief Acevedo with the Houston Police Department said today they respond to 20,000 family violence calls a year. 20,000. At our hotlines, we respond to 44,000 calls a year. So we know this problem is pervasive, and, we not only offer support services, in other words, we help our survivors, but we also offer education and outreach, violence prevention, stamping out violence before it starts, and that starts in our schools and educating our teens and our young people about how violence begins.
What, kind of speaking on that point, what would have you seen be triggers, I guess?
I'm sorry, come again?
Kind of speaking on that point you just referenced as far as like helping with prevention. What are some of those triggers that you've kind of experienced through those educational programs? Like what are the things that they're telling people?
Violence is very pervasive in our community. We see it in media. We experience it. But with young people, with teens, we're talking about teen dating violence. We're talking about words you use. We're talking about rape culture. We're talking about, sexism and misogyny. Those are the things that we educate young people about because it really does start with words, and words lead to escalation, and escalation can lead to violence. It's important work we do, and it's work we do every day, both in our schools and our community. And what we know is that domestic violence, abuse, sexual assault, they do not discriminate. It happens among every socioeconomic realm, within every culture. It doesn't matter if you're blue, red, white, black, rich, poor. It happens.
So where can people who aren't affected, how can they help?
How can you offer support? It's interesting because I think as friends, we always want to say, a victim should leave her abuser, right? She should leave, and it should be that easy. It's not that easy. It's complicated. There's love involved. There's children involved. What we tell our survivors, we offer them the tools they need to make that decision. We offer safety planning. That's very important because what we know is the time that a survivor leaves can be the most dangerous time for that survivor. That's where our homicides might occur and violence might occur. So offering that safety plan, offering support, listening, and then offering resources. I think that's the best thing we can do as friends, as confidants, as support to somebody who might be suffering from abuse and violence.
And one of those resources, I assume, would be one of your hotlines, right?
Yes, the first thing we always say is call the hotline, because that is the gateway to our agency and to access resources both at Houston Area Women's Center and within the community. Call that hotline. That's 713-528-2121.
Is there anything else you want to kind of tell our listeners just about just kind of the landscape?
In our work, we tell survivors 3 very important messages, which is it's not your fault.
Mm-hmm.
Never is it your fault. It's never okay. You're not alone. We do this work every day. We know there are a lot of people in your shoes who are suffering, and help is available. And that help is just a phone call, a hotline call away. And know that, our services are free, are confidential, and we're always there to support.
Thank you so much, Chau.
Devontae, thank you so much for this opportunity.
All right, so when we come back, we're going to actually open up the group discussion and see what you guys had as far as your thoughts on that. We want to thank Chau again for coming on the show and lending her thoughts. And we'll see you guys after the break. You want to advertise on Medulla Talk? Well, contact Total Medulla at totalmedulla.com. Man, women really seem to be dominating the talk show game. And when it comes to male-led talk shows, they're only talking about entertainment, sports, or music. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like the only place I can get deep conversation about stuff coming from black males is either through a sermon or from Neil deGrasse Tyson. Anyway, luckily, Afro Vibes Radio Houston has Medulla Talk. It's literally the embodiment of diversity of thought from a male perspective. We have people from all walks of life and from different backgrounds come to the show and share their thoughts. We discuss social norms, news headlines, philosophy concepts, Houston local issues, as well as common curiosities. Best of all, we aren't afraid to give you that real.
There's a difference between voting and getting involved in the process or having a peaceful protest and stuff like that and busting out windows, beating up people. We cannot get to the point where we try to stop hate with our own anger.
It's Medulla Talk, the diversity of male thought. For voice talent or video production services, contact Total Medulla at totalmedulla.com. Hey guys, welcome back from break. And what did you guys think about the Chau interview?
I thought it was a really good interview. Very informative. I had no idea that it was 74% of Texans that are affected or know someone that's affected. That's more than I was expecting.
Yeah, that was very high. I was like, whoa. That's 3 or 4 out of 4 guys.
Yeah.
That's absolutely crazy. And
it's scary because you don't know how long they've been affected by it. This could have been stuff from childhood all the way to adulthood.
Exactly.
Marriages, child abuse, verbal, sexual. Like, it fits under this large umbrella that you never know what it could be.
Yeah, 20,000 calls a year. That's insane. Just in Harris County?
Yeah.
Houston area.
Houston area. Wow, that's insane.
I mean, I kind of wish that we were able to get kind of like an understanding of, and she was just Houston area, the Women's Center. I was kind of curious is does that translate to like some of the more rural areas of Texas, or is that just because we're just so many in one area that they're responding to 4 to 6 million people?
There are some instances where,
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, go ahead, Jarrell.
Well, absolutely, yes. It really doesn't matter where, and we're talking about the reported incidents of this. Imagine all the unreported incidents that happen.
Absolutely.
So it's absolutely an epidemic.
See, what's interesting? So really, we only have this type of conversation, well, half of this conversation, whenever there is something going on in news. You know, an athlete or a celebrity beats somebody, and then they get carted off to jail or maybe fined, get suspended for a couple of games. And we talk as a society, we talk about how bad this is, and oh man, these are horrible people. When a lot of this stuff happens in our own backyard.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And so a question I want to ask you guys is, you know, in this conversation, especially if you go on YouTube and you see TED Talks and things like that, a lot of women speak about domestic violence. And a lot of those women happen to be victims themselves. Why don't you see guys talking about this? Stephen?
Honestly, I think it's a fear of honesty, because I think for, a lot of men, we don't really know how to handle emotion, and we're not necessarily taught by, whether it's by, societal images that we try to pattern ourselves after, or maybe we're in our own friend groups. We're not taught to express ourselves well enough to be able to talk on a situation like this, because it might be a little embarrassed, like, frankly, because we've all felt some anger and point of view and in some way, form, or fashion. And I think that is actually one thing I will say is that in this country, if an issue is not directly affecting us or directly within our circle,
we tend to ignore it.
We tend to kind of like distance ourselves from it or make ourselves spectators of what's going on rather than actually engaging in anything.
Well, I also think it has something to do with the conversations from a male's point of view, maybe it being uncomfortable to discuss.
They're just going to blame me.
Yeah.
It's always me.
Especially, I think we all kind of may either know someone or may have seen someone that may have been through that. And it's a very uncomfortable conversation to have with that person or with someone who has experienced it. So I think it's a lack of knowledge, maybe a lack of compassion. No, I'm not going to say a lack of compassion, but some people may not have enough empathy to really understand exactly what they go through.
Now, Jarrell actually did an internship. Jarrell, you want to kind of talk about your internship?
Well, most of my internship focused on the male side of it, kind of educating men on various aspects of abuse and kind of having an open door for men who have been abused or were abusers previously. It was kind of like a lecture series, TED Talk thing.
I didn't realize that, huh?
Yeah. And I also wanted to add another thing too. When we talk about domestic violence, a lot of the time it's usually framed as like a physical thing, one partner physically hitting another partner. But to piggyback on what Steven said, a lot of the times when these conversations, that's what people normally, visualize it as, right? A lot of the times too, it's usually there's usually like a psychological or an emotional element of it that's also at play too. So when you talk to men about it, they may not even be aware they're doing it because they're kind of like subconsciously doing it to the partners. They're often rude, nasty, saying things, toying people's emotions, things like that. That can also come into play when we talk about domestic violence issues.
So like gaslighting.
Yes, absolutely. There was one incident where a young woman told me about where she had a roommate where her calling her at all hours of the day and demanding weird things of her. And it escalated to the point where this man got in his car and drove 3.5 hours to the school to borrow like a pen from her, just as like a show of like,
what?
Yes. Just to like, exert control over her.
Was this before gas prices went up?
You know what, Steven?
It was actually it was around that time. But absolutely.
I know this is like a serious episode, but you guys don't know how much these clowns.
Cheesing right now, ear to ear.
I'm not trying to cheese.
Listen,
ahead,
a lot of guys a lot of guys don't know how to talk to the women. A lot of guys don't know how to deal with women, and that's because they've had a lot of issues themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Some abusers have there's one thing we talk about when we talk about domestic abuse, and that's like a risk factor, right?
Yeah.
And more often than not, the people who are doing the abusing were abused themselves, and they often have like a history of family violence, low income. They had like a lot of aggressive or delinquent behavior that they displayed as an adolescent, drug and alcohol abuse, and something even as like menial as low academic achievement can kind of set people off and lead them down this path.
Low academic achievement. What do you mean by that?
Yes,
Like
low
how
academic.
how would that kind of equate to people being abusers or aggressors? I guess would be.
It can mean, it could be two ways. It could be like, I guess, not achieving enough in school, or dropping out, possibly having a lower level of education, like maybe having just like a GED or high school diploma, working a menial job, things like that.
So, Jarrell, are you talking about like, they don't have a sense of purpose, and so
Yes.
Okay.
I'm sorry, go. I'm really bad at interrupting people. Please go ahead.
No, it's all good. I was just wondering. So, like, if they have no sense of purpose, they have no identity, and then it could lead them to a reckless path.
Yeah, they kind of like lose a sense of identity.
Yeah.
And they kind of ending up blaming it on their spouse or their loved ones, taking it out on them
rather than confronting.
So it's kind of like an inferiority complex where because a person's slightly better than you, and even though they may love you, you still feel like you're challenged. So you must find another way to dominate them or kind of put them behind you so you'll feel better about yourself.
Actually, I think that's an excellent thought. Actually, yeah. That was pretty
See how
I don't know if it's clap worthy, but
you basically gave it to him.
Yeah.
Jarrell, I want to ask you something.
Can't be giving them away.
So, kind of what everybody's been saying late in like the last 5 minutes or so, there seems to be a lack of training on men's side to handle emotions.
Yeah.
And obviously a lot of that has to do with being emotional is being weak, right? That's kind of like the locker room societal norm.
But I believe the phrase is hypermasculinity.
Hypermasculinity, yeah.
Or
well,
worse, it's probably
even with that.
Yeah.
Even with that, when we talk about things like showing emotions, like you don't have to be, you don't have to have a feminine character about yourself in order to show emotions. It's all about having like a healthy relationship, being able to respect yourself and your partner and their individuality, being able to be open and honest with each other, supporting each other.
So there's like an emotional infrastructure that you have to have to begin with.
Being empathetic, perhaps.
You absolutely have to have that. Yes.
So Muhammad, you actually have personal experience with this topic.
Yes. So my background, my family background, they're immigrants, right? And so there was something interesting that Chau Nguyen said about how violence is persuasive in American culture, as evidenced in the recent violence with the mass shootings on the rise. It made me question about what about non-American cultures, right? That stem from a patriarchal-based society, and are they just as violent? Because, like, going back to my background, my dad and my mom, they're both from Pakistan. My dad moved to this country, got his degree, bachelor's degree in engineering, and then went back and married my mom. But for some reason, he still, even though he was in the American culture, he still retained some of that patriarchal basis norms from Pakistan, right? And so my dad had a physical abusive relationship with my mom, right? Verbal abuse on both sides, but physical abuse on one side, right, towards my mom. And of course, he saw his dad treat his mom like that growing up. And so is it possible that it's a part of a inferiority complex, right? Not having a strong sense of identity, but also possibly that it's ancestral or a generational pass down, right? And so if it is stemming from one generation to another generation, how does one stop that, right? Makes me wonder.
Yeah. I suppose that you would have to be able to possibly willing to like look within yourself and kind of not go in that same direction. That's going to be hard to do, but that's what's going to have to happen.
And that's
maybe seek some sort of counseling or therapy, with your friends, things like that.
And that's something that you need to have people around you to help you with, because I don't think that's something you can tackle down by yourself.
So you don't go the island route.
I mean, that's the reason why we have an awareness month. That's the reason why we have so many different platforms to.
But do
spread
people
the
take
info.
advantage of that though?
No.
Well, see, that's the thing. It's not being used as well. That's why you have so many activists, and I hate when we have months of things because these things happen all year round.
Exactly.
It's like.
Or like even the fact is, do they even know about it? Like, for
Yeah.
my mom, did she even know there was resources?
And
right, she could turn to her friends
Yeah.
in the Pakistani society in Dallas, but how much does that actually help, right?
Yeah, it's also the environment too. I mean, think about it. In that situation, what if her friends were going through the same thing, and it just kind of became normalized? Like, oh yeah, it happens. Where if they were to be in a different environment, maybe you'd be around other people who may have a different perspective and say, hey, that's not the proper way to do things. You may need help.
Yeah.
Because I think asking a person to change, especially like the abuser or the aggressor, they may, like you said, they may not know they're doing something bad because they've seen it in their past life. They're seeing people.
This is how you handle the situation.
This is all I know.
And yeah, go ahead.
No, I just had a question for you. Continue.
Oh, no, I was just gonna say, yeah, like you're right, Kyle. Like, because I did talk to my dad about domestic violence in 2012. Before I moved to the East Coast, I asked him, like, why does he let his emotions or his temper get the best of him, right? Where he reacts in ways where he physically abuses his significant other, and he told me that it's not so much they get out of hand, but he has to put them in their place. And so it's like, it made me realize, like, is this all he knows in terms of relationships, right? Like, if he saw his dad doing this to his mom, maybe that's what he thought was norm. But of course it's not so. And what it takes to change that behavior.
Yeah, I don't know about that one, man. I mean, I can see like you being the next generation, seeing that stuff and not wanting to repeat it. But if you're already indoctrinated, I don't know how you would go about adjusting.
Yeah, and I think that goes across all cultures, right?
Yeah, of course,
Definitely,
of course.
Well, I'm one thing I'm kind of curious about, Mohammed, and I'm making an assumption here because I don't know if you're married or anything like that. Like, how do you go forward from that? Like, you grew up, you see your dad doing that. Like, how do you approach? Because you're gonna get angry. Like, your emotions like bubble up inside, and like, how do you break a generational curse like that?
So I've talked to my sister about this, right? And my brother about like how are they going to move forward if they have kids. How will they treat their kids, and then of course how will they treat their significant other, right?
Exactly.
Because the physical abuse, if it's happening between two partners, it still has an adverse effect on the kids if they are in the picture. But moving forward, it all comes down, like for me personally, it all comes down to not repeating that same behavior, right? It's like I've been told that changes in generations happen, like they eventually traits stop at certain generations, right?
Yes.
But it's taking an active effort of putting the foot down, making sure that this doesn't continue. And just being cognizant and being aware of my emotions, having control of my own temper, of my own whenever there's an argument, especially if it's the significant other, just knowing what the consequences of your actions can become.
Exactly.
And who it can affect and who it can hurt.
I also think it's very important that the person that's taking the abuse understand that they have options, that they don't have to stay in that situation, that they can find ways out, they can find help. And I think at a certain point in time, that wasn't common knowledge. A lot of people didn't have hotlines, they didn't have websites, they didn't have awareness months, they didn't have committees, they didn't have activists. They just dealt with it themselves. And nowadays we have so many avenues to find help that now you can actually handle a situation like that, but it's up to that person to make that choice.
And I think another key element too is sometimes outside parties can be really beneficial in kind of ending that cycle of abuse. If anyone sees anything, even a hint of it, say something, do something, report it. help the person who's being abused out, talk to the person who's doing the abuse, do anything you can to resolve that situation.
So,
Jarrell, I have a question for you.
Because a lot of the times with these situations can get out of hand, someone may end up dead.
So, Jarrell, what would be some of those signs? Like you said, if you see any signs, step in and help. What would be an example or two of those signs?
Some of the common characteristics of, I guess, someone who abuses would be jealousy, controlling behavior, cruelty to animals and children, just violent mood swings, threats of violence, a violent family history. Just like any one or number of those things can point to signs of abuse within a household.
Do you think alcoholism and drug issues can also play a part in that as well?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay.
See, there's different phases to abuse. There's like a tension building phase where the batter is kind of moody and nitpicking, withdraws away from the person he's abusing, starts drinking or using drugs. And then the batter moves on to like an explosion phase, right? Where they start hitting, choking, humiliating their partner, threatening violence, rape, all manner of vile things that they do to their abuser, right? And then it cycles over to the honeymoon phase, where the batterer essentially tries to beg for forgiveness, promises to get counseling, gives them gifts, promises to never do it again, and just declares their everlasting.
Jarrell? Jarrell's gone.
He was on a roll.
His power must have ran out. Oh, goodness.
But I do understand what he's saying, that there are definitely certain phases to it. And I think that a person has to be aware from the outside, has to be able to see what's going on.
Yeah.
Perhaps to be
One thing I do want to mention, so I was looking at, some research material for this.
Mm-hmm.
What was interesting to me was one person's story. And she was saying how she didn't know that he was going to be abusive. When they entered the relationship, everything was good. He was the sweetest person on the planet.
Yeah.
There were no visible signs, or a giant sign that said, "Hey, I'm an abuser," right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then
come up with 20 questions.
Right.
Yeah.
So she had no idea that, that he would go off on her, 3 months into their marriage. And
oh wow, marriage.
Yeah. So they went through a whole dating. They went through a whole dating
and
phase.
No signs.
I'm a 2-year minimum dating guy for this kind of reason. You can't hide who you are for 2 years.
Yeah.
No.
And then
Jarrell's back.
Yeah, it was kind of weird. Like I was just talking into nothing, and then I realized I can hear you guys.
He ran out of things to say, so he's like, he's like talking. He just.
But so 3 months into the relationship.
So 3 where did I leave off with that? Because I was talking about the different phases.
Well, you were essentially talking about how some of the telltale signs.
Well, I
was kind of going into I'll wrap this up.
Oh.
So
sorry.
So 3 months into their marriage is when the first incident happened, and afterwards they had this whole talk about the things he has to work on, his background, and he had issues with his father, blah 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 blah. I don't know where it came from, and then he started to try to control different aspects of her life, and if she happened to show any kind of sense of resistance or her own free will of something, so a backhand to the face would happen, and it started to become more frequent. And she said that the reason why she stayed was because she thought that she was the only person that really understood his situation, and that she was going to somehow help him.
So she felt sorry for him and kind of felt like she could repair him in a way.
Yeah.
Is that
change him? Okay.
Is that to a Stockholm's level, or is that more along the lines of just you see you see like a tiger that's wounded. You expect that tiger's going to scratch you. That's why you take precautions. And,
well, remember what Chau said in the interview. You know, there's love involved.
Yeah.
You know, and
it starts with love.
Right, and like I said, in the whole dating phase, none of that existed. Right, so she thought that maybe something was going on, you know, now, and that it was her job as the wife to try to help him through, you know, whatever he was going through.
And I can't say that if I was in her position that I wouldn't have stayed, because I take marriage very seriously.
Yeah.
Like, for one, and when you say those vows, to death do you part, and all these other things, sickness and health, rich and poor, yada yada yada, those things for a lot of people are very serious. And you know, no one wants to have a failed marriage or anything like that. Everyone thinks that, oh, I have my problems, eventually I can work through them. And you do hear stories of people working through those things, but I mean, man, that would have been something else.
You also have to realize there's two things that could play out. So if you have children,
yes,
well, now it's no longer about you; it's about the children's safety.
It's true.
So at that point, it's well advised for you to find another situation to get out of this current situation you're in. But then you also have to think about your health, your own personal health. Like it could end in death.
It's true.
These things have gone far enough to where people have died.
Right?
Yeah, and people have died when they try to resist and say, hey, I'm not going to take this anymore, and they leave.
Yeah.
Right? Chau mentioned that.
Mm-hmm.
What ended up happening was she was talking to one of her friends, and her friends got outside help. And that's really where the turning point happened.
That's a good friend.
And so they confronted him. They removed her from the house, and, you know, basically kind of was a human shield in that whole experience. And that's basically what lifted her out. And the end of her message was, you know, for others to step in. Because, you know, sometimes you can't do it yourself.
There's a similar situation that when I used to go to church, there was a member I went to church with that went through that form of abuse with her husband, even while she was pregnant. And she kind of just sat with it because the surrounding congregation was kind of under the idea that, like, well, he wouldn't do this, he wouldn't do that. And then when it happened, they still turned a blind eye to it because of his rank in the church. So luckily, you know, people like my wife and some of her other friends kind of motivated her to move forward.
I gotta find out what churches you guys been going to.
Yeah, you don't want to know.
What's
But
that?
at the end of the day, she made a personal choice to get herself and her children out of that situation.
Yeah.
Wow.
So it's really about courage and bravery, because it's easy to just accept it because sometimes it's just comfortable, because, you know, besides the abuse, you know, they may have financial gain, there may be the stability, the comfort of your lifestyle. There's the love, like you said.
Yeah.
It's just this one thing that keeps happening.
But here, you know, here's a situation that I've seen quite a few times, and I've always like prided myself on knowing what to do and when to do it when things happen. But one time I legitimately saw this guy, like, you know, him and his girlfriend were getting into a spat. They were both like hitting each other and stuff like that. Like, how do you step in if, like, you know, you're in public and you see these two people kind of like going at it? They haven't done anything yet. That's just all of a sudden just kind of like where someone's getting like physically actually like hurt. But they're definitely heading in that direction. Like, how do you even think to yourself, like, this isn't like, how do you overcome this isn't any of my business?
You know, they do that. They had that one TV show, that What Would You Do show, where they set up scenarios and make people. They did something like that, and a lot of people, they would be with another person. So it'd be like a husband and wife, or like 2-3 friends eating, and then when they see that, they would all come together and approach the situation. You rarely saw people by themselves.
Interesting.
Walking up, because you don't know that person's relationship. So that person's relationship, they may bicker like that, but it never actually gets physical. Or they may both get physical to where he gets his butt whooped, she gets his butt whooped, and at the end of the day, they sit down and they shake hands or they hug, whatever. There's a lot of relationships like that. There's a lot of Ike and Tina relationships
where with like a little bit more physical. Not that saying it's okay, but
it's not okay. But that's just how some people work. So there's no proper way to address a person that's that's having some type of a couple that has a situation like that. Your best option is that if you feel like you need to say something, your best option is to go to that person and say, hey, are y'all okay? Is everything all right? I saw you guys going at it. Because you don't know how they might react to you. They might both come at you hard.
At least they're united, I guess.
Yeah, for once.
I guess it's better to ask then not to ask at all.
It's
just
like,
go about your business.
Ask them was like, hey, is everything okay?
Because some people, they may not be able to sleep that night because they may think, oh, God, when he got home, he probably hurt her.
Yeah.
So
Because that legitimately would bother me. Like, I was thankful that, when those things were happening, they were normally with their friends, and then people like separated them from there. But it was always just kind of like weird. Like, how do you be a stranger and to step into someone else's like life like that without feeling like weird, or maybe that you're overstepping boundaries? And if you're just like a guy, just one guy going over to a guy and his girl, like he's going to think, oh, you're going to escalate it further because he's going to be like, oh, you're trying to
save my girl.
Yeah, you're trying to save my girl from me, huh?
Yeah.
Blah, 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 blah. And then, but I guess at that point, it's just like a personal insecurity that's keeping you from actually stepping in rather than.
I mean, you can't intervene all the time. It's like when people would see someone abusing a child or neglecting a child, or if you saw a child acting up and the parent wasn't doing anything, it's not your place to say, ma'am, your child. Yeah. You can do it, but it's not necessarily your duty.
Yeah.
So it's a personal decision you have to make.
Yeah. The worst thing that can happen is they'll tell you mind your business, right?
Yeah. And then you mind your business.
Yeah.
Thing you can do.
But at the very least, you know what's interesting though that I like about that is at the very least their attention has been taken away from purely being mad at that person. And it may be something small, maybe, just for a split second, but at least you've done something to say something to that person where that person now realizes this is what I look like in public.
Yeah.
And
maybe they'll think, maybe they might think about it.
Yeah. And that way they'll probably become more aware
of
their surroundings, of their actions.
Mm-hmm. I did want to ask if any of you guys did anything out of anger.
Oh, yeah.
If they have any experiences on that one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, like, you get in those situations sometimes where you just, like, you blow your top and you yell at somebody. But, I mean, more often than not, that's really not going to, like, escalate into anything more unless there's already, like, a previous history of that.
Exactly.
I think everybody's had that issue before. Yeah.
Well, personally, and this happened when I was about, like, 16 years old. I had gotten my first breakup. After I was happy. I was like, I thought this was
familiar with breakups.
5 weeks.
Yeah, too soon.
We give it 5 weeks, and then we have that topic. Okay, we're just gonna nip that in the bud. We're not gonna talk about it right now, and then we're gonna go from there. All right. Now let me get serious again. Anyway,
you were serious at the beginning?
Yeah, I was serious. Okay, all right. I'm trying my best here, guys. I only cracked like 4 jokes this whole time. That's a new record.
Go ahead, Steve.
No, but yeah, like I, 16, I was just coming off my first football injury and stuff like that. And, everything was kind of going well. And then all of a sudden, my girlfriend breaks up with me. The one I was in love with, the one I had given my heart to, I had given Valentine's Day presents, I'd given everything to. And not necessarily everything, but, I legitimately, was just so distraught. I didn't understand. And it took me months and months to try to move past it. Well, things certainly didn't help because they started to escalate. She started dating one of these guys who was technically, he wasn't my manager at work, but he was for my after school job. He was kind of the guy that supervised me on a lot of different jobs and stuff like that. I worked at a grocery store. So, so he was essentially in a position of power over me. And I felt I was laughing because I was thinking about what you guys were talking about, how guys feel insecure. It made me feel insecure because he was taller than me. Mm-hmm. He was a pretty good looking guy. I'll be real. And it really felt like, maybe she traded up. And then I was just kind of and everybody knew she broke up with me. So I was very, very insecure about that one big thing. Well, fast forward a couple of months, I found out that from somebody that's just down the rumor mill that he might be cheating on her. And, I didn't know whether to say something or anything like that. And I ended up telling a friend, an acquaintance more like, on the football team. And essentially he went back and told her, and she went back and told him. And essentially he confronted me and he said, hey, he wasn't in high school. I was in high school. And, everyone's got that, high school mentality. It was like, hey, you got my name in your mouth, blah, 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 blah. I don't care how young you are. I'll kick your butt, blah, 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 blah. And frankly, I was a bit upset. And and I felt belittled. And on top of the fact, it's like, you're already dating my girl, even though she wasn't my girl, but you're already dating the girl that you took from me, and he didn't take her. But it just kind of snowballed.
Yeah.
So instead of kind of like confronting the situation, I just went directly to her. And I was just like, why would you do this? Like, I was just like, blah, 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 talking to somebody. Then she essentially told me off. I'm not going to say everything she said. Still kind of sore about it. And I hauled off and hit a wall next to her head. I did that.
Yikes.
Me. And you guys know me.
Yeah.
And that shook me for the next few years. And honestly, like, I think if you can really take anything from that, it literally can happen to any of us. A moment where we are so overwhelmed by things, and I could blame it on me being 16. I could blame it on me not learning or adopting the chill persona that I have today. But legitimately,
that's called maturity.
Yeah, maturity. Yeah.
Yeah.
If we allow our emotions and we don't confront the things that make us insecure or confront the feelings that we're afraid of, we end up in a situation like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll never forget the look on her face. It wasn't that she was just like afraid. She was just kind of like taken aback, and I didn't hit her. I was just, and I guess I was most frustrated with the fact that I did that rather than any of that situation at all.
Yeah.
And it was just, and I always ask myself that question. Actually, not less so today, but like for years after that, I asked myself, what would I would have done if that wall wasn't there?
You see, what's crazy is a lot of people don't ask themselves that question. They just, next time I'm going to actually try to connect.
Exactly.
Some people actually have that mentality. So I think that's great that you have that moment in your head forever, because anytime you reach a certain point of anger, you're always going to replay that and remember what happened.
Oh, yes, definitely.
Yeah, that's great.
And it's crazy because 74%, when that's reported in Texas.
Reported.
And that's reported.
Right.
Guys, if you're out there, I'm going to be real with you right now. You are not alone. Get help.
Now, speaking on that,
Please.
how do you guys personally deal with your emotions?
Now I deal with everything with kind of like a degree of dissociation. Not to the point where I'm just like, oh, that wasn't about me, or I don't take criticism. I see criticism as, yes, it hurts, but there's a reason why you get criticism. There's a reason why, and it's a perception that outside people have of what's going on inside you. They don't know what's going on in your mind. They don't know that, you didn't mean to spread rumors about them. But what they see from you, they will speak on it because that's just how they see you. And what you do is you have to learn to take criticism. Because if you don't, you will find yourself for the rest of your life like snapping. Eventually reaching a point and snapping.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can definitely say as a married man, you have to talk to your spouse, to your children, in-laws. Like you said, you have to know what triggers you. You have to discover it. So you have to put yourself in uncomfortable situations to know exactly how you can handle it. Mm-hmm. So me personally, I actually never had like a violent outburst. Or we've had verbal,
Exactly.
And, you can kind of feel inferior sometimes to your spouse. Maybe your spouse might say something that is right, but you didn't want it to be right. You wanted her to be wrong, or you wanted her to not know.
Ooh.
But when she actually digs in deep and says the right thing,
you're just like your father.
Yeah, something like that. To where you're like, oh, I can't talk to you right now. Or we yell at each other. She's not yelling, I'm yelling. I realize I'm the one that's raising my voice, so I need to calm down. And when that person points it out, you have to be mature enough to say, you know what? Sorry. Let's start over. Let's conversate. Let's talk. Or else, if you don't do that, you're gonna stay yelling, still screaming, and then eventually it might escalate.
I agree. You know what's funny? I actually, and my girlfriend often complains about this, is that when we get into an argument, I do not yell. I do have flare-ups every once in a while. I am not.
Yeah, you're human.
Yeah, I'm human. But what I've realized is that you let the person talk. Because when someone's yelling at you, or someone's like, flaring up at you, sometimes it's that they don't feel heard. They don't feel that what they're saying is reaching your ears. So therefore, what do? They raise the volume. They exaggerate movements.
I need you to know how mad I am right now, so I'm going to yell.
It's like, why do you have that calm look on your face? This, that, and the third. People have to feel heard. And if you're yelling and they're yelling, who's listening?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think it's like effective communication, especially between two parties. If they're fighting, if they're not communicating their messages, it escalates. It can escalate real quickly.
Mm-hmm.
But like Kyle said and what Steven said is that you got to just talk to them. That's what I try to do whenever I get angry. If I have an argument, I try to go back to the drawing board and either ask them or people familiar with the situation to find out if I was wrong, or find out what their thoughts are, get their positive feedback, and try to talk about the situation with reason.
Yeah.
You know.
Do you guys happen to, like, if you find yourself just overwhelmed with emotion, do you just back away and then come back to it when that passed? Or do you think it's better to just dig in while it's happening?
Being able to manage your emotions and channeling it into something meaningful is probably the best thing to do in that situation. Kind of walking away, taking a deep breath, thinking about what was said in that conversation earlier, and then coming back to it is probably the best thing to do in that sort of situation.
I think at the boiling point, yes, I agree.
Of course, like acknowledging, right? If you do become the aggressor, acknowledging like, oh yeah, my bad, I didn't mean to yell at you. Of course, it all comes down to being aware.
Mm-hmm.
You have to actually own it.
Yeah, own up to it.
So much of what we do in relationships, we say, yeah, I was wrong, but you did this.
Yeah.
See, and that's not what you want to do. Like the last thing you want to do is keep score.
Yeah.
So I didn't do the dishes. Well, you didn't take the trash out.
But I love keeping score. I have a really good memory.
That's great.
It's like a really good memory.
But what do you win if you keep score?
It's true.
What's the end game?
Yeah, it's true.
Like none of you wants to lose. You both want to win. So bringing up old things that may be a negative or something that's lesser to that person will not help your argument at all. In fact, it's gonna let them reach back in their arsenal and pull something you didn't do back in 2005, and then
we have a 2-week rule.
Oh, don't talk about nothing past 2 weeks.
If it's past 2 weeks, like, because we don't take too long to like apologize to each other about stuff.
Mm-hmm.
We apologize, then we move on, and then after 2 weeks, it can never be brought up again in a conversation. She more came up with that rule because she was I was coming up with too much fire for her. So
throwing those jabs.
I was just kind of just like, well, you did this. Well, I never thought about it like that. But I mean, no, I'm right.
I just picture Steven pulling out like a scroll.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, back 2 years ago,
on October 7th, 2014, you said
the who, what, and when, and why, everything's written down.
You literally can't be that way.
Yeah, he got a stenographer in the closet typing everything down.
Typing away, a court reporter, going at it. Yeah, it can easily boil down to tit for tat, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Too easy.
Like I told you, or even the times when something happens and it's like, and you tell your significant other, I told you so. That can lead into an argument.
But I like to win.
But it feels so good.
If
like,
I don't send
I'll
it, how does she know?
When you're right about something and they're wrong about something, like for instance, one time we were driving, my wife accidentally spilled something in the car, and I was like, "See, you shouldn't have brought that in the car." I said, "I told you not to bring that in the car." And then for about 5 minutes,
yeah, exactly.
And while I'm saying this, my wife's on her phone, like, "What you say?" Like literally, I guess the response I got. Yeah. So it's like, now I'm mad because she doesn't feel bad about what happened, but honestly, she does. It's just that it's not a horrible thing that happened. You just clean up the spill, you keep moving. So really, I was crying over spilled soda, spilled milk, or whatever.
Literally.
Yeah.
You guys have any final thoughts for our listeners?
I just want. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, Jarrell, you've been quiet long enough.
Boy, I just want people to know that. These things happen and we need to acknowledge it. And like we said earlier, not just acknowledge it for 1 month out of the year, but have a continuous dialogue about this, raise awareness, and help out wherever we're needed in regards to domestic violence.
Steven?
Identify why you're insecure. You can try to hide You can try to deflect. You can try to move things away. And that won't help you. There's a lot of men out there, I know people are listening probably, that are dealing with this kind of thing, that deal with anger, unchecked anger, whether it's something that they grew up with or they just never got around to like addressing. But it's important for you and your progeny that you break the cycle now.
I believe that we should all be in uncomfortable situations, so we'll learn how to handle them, so we can actually learn how to deal with these situations. It does start with childhood. I do believe parents should teach their sons respect people's space, opinions, behavior. It should not always be, the girl's fault. It shouldn't always be the victim's fault. And when it comes to women or anyone who may be in a more vulnerable state, please be able to see when signs may be occurring. If you feel violated, if you feel threatened, if you feel like abuse may be coming, if you can't talk to your spouse, please find someone you can talk to, someone who can help you. You got to see the signs before they happen.
All I would say is that if, especially towards the male, is if they feel that there's no issues wrong with them in terms of anger, please refute that. Try to see it from the other point of view, and own up to your actions, and seek help. Be the bigger person at the end of the day, and accept your flaws and seek help.
Yeah. And I would just like to say for those who aren't involved, to not be so hypocritical. And what I mean by that is I hear a lot of folks who really get on athletes and celebrities whenever they have their dirty laundry out in the public. These things happen to everyone. And we shouldn't be just uber hard on athletes and not be hard on ourselves. So let's show some consistency. And, if you're really passionate about, Ray Rice smacking some person in, upside the head, then maybe you should be equally as passionate if you see somebody in the same similar situation at a grocery store. So that's just my take on that. But I appreciate all you guys being on the show today.
Oh, yeah.
I know this was a very difficult topic, but I thought we handled it very well.
Would it be wrong if I said I had fun? Like, I thought this was actually...
Fun wouldn't be the word.
No, like, I legitimately... Like, every time we talk about something serious or we get down to business, and I enjoy it. And I definitely have enjoyed myself.
I think everyone, including the listeners, should get an applause.
But I don't like to share that. Can we just say that was for me? Or
if it helps you sleep at night.
I'm incredibly insecure if you didn't listen to
I think there's a clapping app on your phone you can get. It claps when you walk in the room.
Don't tempt me.
I want to thank everybody for listening, and sharing your evening with us. Next week, we are going to touch a little bit on the Las Vegas massive shooting that happened during the Jason Aldean's performance. That happened, and so we'll touch on that
in the episode entitled "Here We Go Again."
Yes, here we go again.
That is aptly titled.
That was Steven?
Unfortunately, that title can work for many things in this country.
Exactly.
I come with that titles, bro. I come with that fire.
Okay, let's end the show before he starts again.
Today's poll question is: what will you do to help your neighbor if you found out that they experienced domestic violence? So that's going to be in our poll section. Just go to the episode. It's going to be episode 3 on the Total Medulla website, and just look for the titled domestic violence.
Can they email us too?
You can email.
Yeah.
Yes, if you want to email the poll question answers.
Express yourself.
We want to try to get as many answers as possible. This is a conversation between all of us, not just the people at the studio. But that's all the time that we have for today. Oh, Jarrell.
I just wanted to mention, I lost my train of thought here. Go ahead, end the show.
Go ahead, end the show.
Go ahead, end the show, Devontae.
Go ahead, end the show. He's lost it.
We will see you guys next week, okay?
Love you guys. Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Medulla Talk on Afro Vibes Radio Houston. Join the Medulla community at totalmedulla.com and make sure to follow us on Facebook and Twitter at Total Medulla.